Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. I love novels, and I'm usually reading 2 at a time, one at home and one on Audible in my car. So recently, when I was asked to interview a featured author for the PBS Library of Congress Book Fair, I jumped at the chance. Little did I know that reading All the Sinners Bleed would turn me into a serious fangirl of our guest today. His name is S.A. Cosby, and he's more than a novelist. He's a storyteller. If you're not familiar with his work, you're in for a treat. Stay tuned. A conversation with S.A. Cosby is next on Another View, right after this news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Thank you to everyone who supported Another View by becoming a member of WHRO Public Media. We so appreciate you. And just in case you missed our fall membership drive, no worries. You can always join us. You just go to WHRO.org and click Donate. I want to tell you 2 things happening in the community very quickly. First of all, the Workplace Bullying Awareness Symposium, Mitigating Organizational Risks, is coming up on October the 6th at 12 noon at the Hive in Virginia Beach. Now, this is an opportunity for business owners, politicians, and and community leaders to take advantage and understand what is happening in terms of bullying within the workplace and how you can mitigate risk. So if you'd like to know more or like to register, go to workplacebullyingawareness-symposium.eventbrite.com. Workplace Bullying Awareness Symposium.eventbrite.com, or you can dial 757-919-9055 to find out more information. And also a special note for our listeners who live in Newport News. The city needs your input about flooding and drainage issues. Now, there is a survey online. The deadline to respond is this weekend, September 24th, and city leadership really want to hear from you. Go to nnva.gov and search for Stormwater Master Planning Effort. So according to our guest today, there are 3 guarantees of small-town Southern living: sex, religion, and racism, not necessarily in that order. He ought to know S.A. Cosby grew up in Mathews County, Virginia. He's a New York Times bestselling author, recipient of several literary awards, and he's cornered the crime noir novel market with his books, including the latest one, All the Sinners Bleed. Please welcome to Another View author S.A. Cosby, and the S stands for Sean. Hey, Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I am such a serious fangirl now. After you and I did an interview for the PBS Library of Congress Book Fair, which is on YouTube. You guys can go check it out. But after that, Sean, guess what? I have read all 4 of your books.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Just ignore the bad words. I'm really not. I'm really much nicer than my books may lead you to believe.
I was going to say, and I read them in backwards order. So, obviously I had read All the Sinners Bleed because that's your latest one. Then I went to Razorblade Tears. And then I went to Blacktop Wasteland and finished with My Darkest Prayer. And I will say that especially My Darkest Prayer, if you are prudish, you may want to approach that book cautiously.
Yeah, that's the one I give warnings about, just because that was my first novel, and I think young S.A. Cosby back then was really trying to emulate and it's almost a pastiche of the great writers that I admired growing up. So it's one of those things. It's funny, like writing is you're able to kind of look back in time and see yourself progress. So I hope I'm a little more judicious in my writing subject matter now than I was back then.
Well, one thing that is always amazing to me is how you come up with these plots and the storylines, because every now, as soon as you think you've kind of figured out, okay, I know where this is going, here comes something else at you that you just go, wow, where did that come from? You said to me in our other interview that we did that you are a storyteller. And that is so true. But what does that mean for you?
I mean, I grew up in a very large family, and my mother has 4 brothers and sisters. My father has almost 11. Wow. And so I have so many first cousins, and which made dating difficult growing up in Mathews because you're related to everybody. So we all got to go across the river to Newport News. Let's all pile in a car because we're all cousins with everybody in the neighborhood. But I grew up around folks who were just really great raconteurs. I grew up around backyard barbecue orators, and I learned the sort of oral gift, the oral tradition of storytelling from my grandmother, my grandfather, my uncles, my aunts. And so couple that with just my voracious reading habits as a child, and then being around books. We grew up in a household, we weren't as financially advantageous as some other families, but we had so much love and so many books around us. My mom read biographies. My grandmother read romance novels that I probably shouldn't have been reading. That's where that stuff comes from.
That's what I was going to say. That's how you got to write My Darkest Prayer. I got it.
Yeah. My uncle read detective novels like Mickey Spillane and John D. McDonald and Ross McDonald. And then my aunt, who lived next door, read Stephen King novels and horror novels. And so I was just always surrounded by storytelling. So between hanging out with my uncles around the grill during a barbecue, or hanging out with my aunts when they were making Thanksgiving dinner, or just sitting around listening to my mom tell stories, I've always been surrounded by storytelling. So it's been something that's been in my blood my whole life.
That's so cool. And, it's really cool also to listen to or read about the references to our area, to Southeastern Virginia, in your stories. So it just kind of really makes it come alive, especially for those of us who live here. So let's talk about All the Sinners Bleed, since that's your latest book. What is it about?
So basically, All Sinners Bleed is the story of Titus Crown. He's the first black sheriff in a small southern town. On the 1-year anniversary of his election, there's a tragic shooting at a school, and a local teacher is murdered by a former student, and then that former student is confronted by Titus's deputies, and that former student dies as well. And in investigating the shooting, Titus uncovers a horrific crime right under the noses of everyone in town, that the teacher, the student, and a third mystery person were a trio of serial killers, and their victims were young, teenage black boys and girls. And so Titus finds himself drawn to this mystery. He feels like he has a moral responsibility to solve it, while at the same time dealing with the everyday, day in and day out minutia of being a sheriff in a small town, with all the things that are involved in that. And so for me, the story really is about a person who stands up for the least of us. I like to think of Titus as a knight errant, so to speak. And so he's the one that decides, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to stand in the gap between the darkness and the light for the people that I care about. And,
Titus is when you also get to know him as a person, because beyond his work, his law enforcement work, you get to find out about his love life. You get to find out about his relationship with his father. Relationship is important to you in your books. Yes?
Yeah, most definitely. Definitely. Because I think for me, like there are only 4 or 5 plots in writing. Man versus man, man versus himself, man versus nature, so on and so forth. And so that, that's a given when you start writing. For me, what I try to do to set my writing apart, or the writing that I love reading, the writers that I admire, are writers who really delve into the complexity and nuance of relationships and how that affects character. For me, character drives story. The plot is the car, but the character is the person behind the wheel. And so that's what I always try to emphasize and focus on when I'm writing.
So where do your characters come from? How do you, in all of your books, I mean, does something just kind of pop in your head and you go, that might be interesting, or where do they come from?
I'm laughing because everybody that I know that I went to school with, everybody wants to be in the books. Like everybody, it's like, is that person me? Is that based on me? Or what I love is when they pull me aside and surreptitiously kind of whisper, is that person based on so-and-so? And so it's like, and I always say yes, because everybody's in the books. Everything that I've experienced is in the books. But as far as the characters, they're amalgamations of people I grew up with, people I knew, people I admired. Sometimes I like to say that they're people that I knew turned up to 11, both in the negative and the positive. And so I try to take everything I grew up with, everything that I was surrounded with as a child, and I take that to make what I hope are true characters and not caricatures. And I think, especially as a Southern writer, you see that a lot, or in other fiction sometimes, that Southern characters, rural characters are caricatures. They're parodies of what we really experienced growing up in rural Virginia, rural North Carolina, rural South Carolina, etc. And so for me, it's very important that my characters are real people, that they're fully fleshed out individuals with highs and lows, with good and bad points. And so for me, again, that's what drives the story. It's a murder mystery is a plot as old as Cain versus Abel, but for me, it's the characters that add a different flavor to it, and that's what I'm so focused on when I write.
So how long do your characters live with you after you finished the book?
Oh, man, sometimes they never leave. It's funny. By the time I get to when I start a book, a lot of times I have a very clinical way of looking at the characters. These are the characters. It's almost like chess pieces I'm putting in place. But by the end of the book, I care about these. They become real people to me. I worry about them. I want the best for them. And so they stay with me for a long time. I put them through a lot. But
they do go through a lot.
Yeah.
So is Titus going to find love eventually? Is Titus coming back to us at some point?
Oh, my God. Poor Titus. He's just, the thing about Titus, and I think one of the reasons I wanted to really put his love life in the book is because I was very interested in how, there's an old line, to stare into the abyss, be careful the abyss doesn't stare back at you. And I was really fascinated about people who choose to stare into the abyss, people who choose to face evil. How does it affect not only your professional life, like you said, as a law enforcement officer, but how does it affect your life as a brother, as a son? There's a line in the book where one of Titus's, a lady that Titus had a past relationship with, says to him, you're a really good boyfriend, but you're terrible at relationships. And I thought that was important because I think Titus wants to be a good boyfriend, but he's seen so much and been through so much. Sometimes it's difficult for him to be open, open emotionally. But I hope if he comes back that he'll find some happiness down the road.
I hope so too, because I really like Titus. But now in Razor Blade Tears, though, you really, so let me back up. You talk about in Southern living, in Southern writing, there's certain tenets that are a part of the life there. So sex, religion, racism, classism, and in Razor Blade Tears, you really take on the whole idea of homophobia, as well as the violence and everything that surrounds that, but also the whole idea of racism and these two, this black father and this white father, and their individual homophobia, but then also having to deal with each other on a racial level.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Really it is. It's a lot. It sounds heavy, and it is, but I try to keep the plot moving along. I try to keep the story singing. Thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate that. For me, I think if you grow up in the South, racism is a problem for the entire country, but I think in the South specifically, you are confronted with it in such a visceral way. I grew up, you know, in a small town, like many small towns across the South, my town's not unique, that have, you know, soldier statues to Confederate soldiers celebrating, you know, the rebellion against the United States. And as a black person who is a proud Southerner, I don't say that lightly. I'm a son of the South, and I'm proud to be from the South. Yeah. But I think, to paraphrase James Baldwin, because I love the South, I reserve the right to criticize it, you know, because I know it can be better than what it is. And so a lot of times with Raised by Tears, I wanted to show that a lot of times if you're a Southerner, whether you're black or white, you have more in common with each other than you have from someone from the North or from the western part of the country or from the Midwest. There are certain things, like if I say to a Southerner, black or white, scrapple, I don't have to explain what that is.
You sure don't.
There's a shorthand that exists because we're all eating it. What some people call Southern cuisine is soul food. You know, and so I think there's a camaraderie there that many times some people don't want to acknowledge. And so I really wanted to address that in the book, but also I wanted to address like the idea of homophobia, the idea of narrow-mindedness in small towns. And I don't think that narrow-mindedness is the default. I think it's something that can be addressed. And, you know, I wanted to address it. And so that's what was important to me about talking about that in Raised by Tears. Also talking about toxic masculinity, you know, talking about how that affects not only the people who perpetuate it, but the people themselves, you know, and not only the people that you extend it to, but also how it affects you internally. So, you know, for me, crime novels are the best way that I found to examine the things that are important to me as a part of the human condition, if that doesn't sound too pretentious. But, you know, I think, you know, for me, crime fiction is the gospel of the dispossessed. You know, like if you read a novel by Philip Roth, right, I may not understand what it's like to be a humanities professor at a Northeast college, but everybody understands what it feels like not to have enough money to get what you want. You know, if you read a novel by James Smiley, I may not understand what it's like to be a farm owner who owns 1,000 acres in Nebraska, but everybody understands what it feels like when your heart is broken. And so for me, crime fiction revolves around those very basic human tenets, and I'm able to use that to tell what I hope are very interesting, fast-paced stories. I mean, but all my books are really a love letter to where I grew up. I love Virginia. I love the area I grew up in, Mathews, Gloucester, Middlesex, the Middle Peninsula. And so for me, when I'm able to tell these stories, I'm able to tell the stories of my uncles and my aunts and my grandfathers and my friends' fathers. And it means a lot to me to be able to share that with the world.
How much of the characters are little pieces of you?
I think if you asked me that a couple of years ago, I would have said 30%, but now as I've gotten older, I'll say 10%. Because the characters I read about now are much cooler and much smarter than me. But I think, you know, there are times when characters speak in their own voice, and there are times when characters speak for the author. I think, you know, there's an issue, I think, sometimes with people who think when you write about something, that's an endorsement of it. You know, I'll tell you a funny story really quick. So every year on Mother's Day, I love to post a clip on social media from the movie 3:10 to Yuma. It's my favorite Western. It stars Russell Crowe and Christian Bale. Anyway, there's a scene in there where Russell Crowe is confronting a deputy. He's an outlaw, and the deputy has said really rude things about his mother, and Russell Crowe's like, hey, even bad men love their mamas. And I posted, and I think Bug, who's the main character of Black Top Wasteland, would agree with that. And I had so many people come into the tweet or into the post and say, Bug is not a bad man. Don't say that about him. And so it's like, I think I love that people love the characters. I love that people understand the characters, but I am not endorsing what Bug does in that book. Bug is a complicated man. I'll leave it at that.
Well, he is complicated, and Bug was really trying to help his family. I mean, he had altruistic reasons for the things that he did, even though, you know, I mean, it all comes down to the choices that we have to make, and your characters make some really tough choices, some because of where they are, you know, the circumstances that they are facing at that, you know, at that given time. And then the question comes down to, you know, whatever your decision is, there's going to be a consequence. And so got to weigh whether the consequence is worth it or not. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Have you read any of S.A. Cosby's crime noir novels? Give us a call. Tell us what you think. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, you are like this giant of an author now, and even Barack Obama had you on his, must-read list. Go ahead, dude. That's pretty cool.
I'm gonna tell you the truth. I when I first heard that, I was literally burst out into tears. I was laughing and crying at the same time. I couldn't believe it. It's just, it's one of those things that it's so surreal. You almost have to ask yourself, is this really happening? Like, is somebody trying to prank me?
Wow.
Is one of my friends and mess with me? And it's like, no, the former president of the United States, one of our most erudite, one of our most scholarly presidents in my lifetime, knows your name. And not only knows your name, likes your stuff. And like I said, I want to apologize. Like, Mr. President, please ignore all the curse words. It's like, I'm really not that bad of a person. But I had a friend of mine that told me, like, he's all right, man. He don't mind. He's from Chicago. So
well, and the thing, too, is that, I don't think I would see Bug speaking, in in very correct, proper, English language. That wouldn't jive with his personality and who he is. So there you go with that one. But this journey of yours is not just like an overnight success kind of thing. You've been this for a long time. Tell us.
Yeah, no, I've been writing since when you had to send a self-addressed stamped envelope to get your story back. So I've been writing since before those emails. That tells how old I am. But it's funny. I've always wanted to do this. I just never thought it would happen in a way that would be, something I could make a living at. My mom has passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago, but she always was like, oh, thank you. And she was always like, I want you to write because, that's what you got to do. My mom always believed that writing was my thing, that everyone has this thing that they can do. And she would always say, birds got to sing, bees got to sing, you got to write. But at the same time, she was like, make sure you got a good job, make sure you work. And so I was very glad that she lived long enough to see some of this come to fruition. She saw some of this happen. And that, it's funny, though, I had two teachers who really, really supported me as the idea of being a writer. One was my fourth and sixth grade teacher, because she switched grades, was Miss Lolita Payton, who really, sort of noticed early on that not only did I love to read, but I love to write. I would tell stories in class, and then instead of getting in trouble, she would let me tell my stories to the class, and then she encouraged me to write my stories. And so she was one teacher. And then another teacher was Mr. Jeff Bone. He was my 11th grade English teacher, and he really supported me. He really noticed that I had a talent for writing. He gave me books like E.B. and White and Strunk's Elements of Style and the collected works of Samuel Beckett, stuff that wasn't on the high school syllabus, but he thought I would appreciate it. And he always supported me, like, you got to write. You're such a good writer. And so after graduation, I went to college for a couple of years. I had to drop out. My mother was ill, and she got even sicker, so I had to come out. But every time I would run into him in the neighborhood, because he still lived around town, he's like, "You still writing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." He's like, "Don't give up. So years go by, and now, he's been able to see me do this, and he came to my book signing a couple years ago, and it was like he was so proud of me. He was crying, I was crying, everybody was crying.
That is so cool. And I read somewhere where you wrote one story when you were like in elementary school or whatever, and they actually sent you to the school psychiatrist.
Yeah, so I wrote this really gnarly werewolf story, and my teacher I was passing it around my friends. And, of course, one of my friends messed up and let the teacher see it. And she was very concerned. So I had to go talk to the school psychologist. But to his credit, he was like, no, there's nothing. He's fine. He's just very creative. He has a very creative mind. And, he gets bored easily. And so he really also believed in me as a writer. So, I think writing is a form of madness anyway, but he was able to see the creativity through the madness. So I appreciate that.
So there you go. If you're just joining us, I'm having a conversation with New York Times bestselling author S.A. Cosby. His His latest book is All the Sinners Bleed. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What questions do you have for Mr. Cosby? Let's go to Kate in Norfolk. Hi, Kate. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. Hi, Sean. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Good. Well, Sean, you referenced earlier that your family, they're just full of readers and you were around books growing up, and you specifically referenced your aunt reading Stephen King. So how did you feel that the Stephen King reviewed your book, All Sinners Bleed, in the New York Times?
I felt crazy. I felt like I was in a dream. I felt like I was going to cry. It was so just incredibly monumental. I mean, there's this writer, this author, this legend of American letters, who not only reviewed the book but liked it and really read it. Like, if you read the review, you can tell he really read the book, and it's a true, honest review. You know, he didn't like everything, but he liked enough that it made me happy. So, honestly,
is
it's just
framed in your home now.
Oh yeah. I got it framed in my home, and my aunt has a copy too. So, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for the call.
Enjoyed the book.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks so much for the call. We appreciate that. So people really are reading, and it's interesting because I think I'm one of the rare talk show hosts who actually reads the book before I bring the author on the show. But I wonder, for you, as now that you're really into the interviewing and talking with people about your books and so forth, do you feel like it is the PR questions that send ahead, or are people really delving into what you're about and having a good interview?
I'll say this: there are times when I do an interview where I can tell the person read the back jacket copy, and there are times where I can tell the person really read the book because they have really in-depth questions. I'm happy to talk about in either situation because I love talking about books, not just my own. I mean, I love talking about books. I'm still a very voracious reader. I just don't get as much time to read as I used to. So if you want to talk about books and you want to talk about mine and just read the back copy, or you want to ask in-depth questions about why is Titus left-handed, I'm good either way.
So what would you tell aspiring writers or people who write but go, I don't know if I need to send this off to somebody? I mean, I know there's a lot of self-publishing opportunities out there too. Is that a good way to go? Or
I think you have to figure out what works best for you. Self-publishing is definitely a viable opportunity, and it's a way that you can get your name out there and get started. Self-publishing requires a lot of work because you have to really hustle to get your books out and get your books' attention in a huge market. But I think whatever route you go, whether traditional publishing or self-publishing, the thing that you have to have in your mind is you have to be able to take criticism, both negative and positive. You have to be able to have a thick skin. I think that's the most important thing. If this is for you, if writing is the thing that you feel like you're supposed to do, then you won't be happy doing anything else. I had dozens of other jobs, and I think I was pretty good at them. For years, I was like a retail manager for 11 years. I won awards, and commendations doing the retail job. I really loved my coworkers. I truly love. Shout out to Gloucester 1723 Lowe's. That's my old store. And I love those folks, but I never was as completely happy and complete as I am now writing. I was writing then part-time, writing on my lunch break, and that's when I felt most like myself. Writing is the thing that makes me feel like this is who I'm supposed to be. And I think if you're a writer or somebody aspiring, I'll tell you like this, like Walter, I'm a name drop now. Walter Mosley told me once, I met him a few times, but he told me, it doesn't matter whether you're published or not. If you complete the story you intend to write, then you're a writer. And I think, but at the same time, if you want to be professional, if you want to make this a career, you have to be prepared to get rejected. My first book, Darkest Prayer, was rejected over 60 times.
Really? And so what gave you so was it just that whole desire to really get this book out there that made you keep going? Because 60 times is a lot to not say never mind.
I think that and a little bit of spite. But more so, I just felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. I think there's a bit, like I said, there's a bit of madness and stubbornness when it comes to the arts, and I just felt like I'm just going to keep going. Because if you had asked me 10 years ago, what's my goalpost? What's my ultimate goal? It was just to get published. It was just to have somebody other than my mother and my brother see my books and like them. I never thought about New York Times bestseller list. Never thought about being on Barack Obama's summer reading list or movie adaptations. All I wanted was for people to see my writing. And I think that sort of drive is what sustains you when you get the 60 rejection, when you get the bad reviews, when you get the negative reactions, is that this is the thing I'm supposed to be doing, and this is where I'm supposed to be, and nothing can shake me from that realization.
So, Sean, let me ask you this then. How do you deal with the editing process? Because I'm sure that first manuscript, when you finish writing it, then you have to take it to someone else who's going to edit. And a lot of times people have issues with others editing their work. How do you handle that?
For me, it was, there are things in the books that I feel are non-negotiable. There are things that I'm not going to change. There are things that are really representative of the story and the message I'm trying to get across. However, there are things that are not lines in the sand. And I think when you get a really good editor, and I'm lucky that I have a really good editor at Flatiron, shout out to Christine Koprash, who understands what you're trying to do, then the editing process doesn't become a negative. It doesn't become a whittling away or a cutting process. It becomes a process to make things better. And so when you get an editor that really understands you, he or she or they are going to make you better. They want you to be better. And so, we all as writers, as creative people, we have our excesses. Like if you read my early stuff, I'm addicted to similes and metaphors. There's like 12 simile metaphors on every page. And I've learned to pare that down. Less is more. And I think when you meet an editor who really gets that, you don't mind their changes. You don't mind their suggestions because it's all in service to a better story. And so for me, that's the way I look at it, and my editor knows there are certain things that I'm not going to change. There are certain things I'm not going to compromise on. But at the same time, I think art is supposed to be among the masses. It's supposed to be among the people. And if you don't compromise, if you don't learn to take constructive criticism, then the only people who are ever going to see your art are you. Right. And that's not what you're meant to do.
Yeah, you want to get it further than that. We got a couple calls holding. Let's go to Ed in Hampton. Hi, Ed. You're on the air. Ed, can you turn your radio down, please?
Yes, my name is Ed O'Donnell.
Hi.
I called you a couple weeks ago about that wonderful program that you had about the storyteller.
Oh, yes. I remember Ed. Yes. So, what's your question? What's your question
well,
for?
I'll tell you what. Okay. First of all, congratulations to this wonderful author. He's new to me, but I will buy all of his books.
Oh, thank you so much.
All of them.
Thank you so very much.
You're what I hear this morning is the first time I've heard of you. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I have a comment though.
Go ahead.
There's somebody. Somebody, I don't know if you heard of him, I'm sure you have, Pat Conroy.
Yes.
Conroy. He was from the Southern, pardon me?
He wrote the book Prince of Tide.
Pat Conroy, he wrote, he is one of my contemporaries. I am 83 years old and an avid reader. He wrote books that were made into movies, including The Great Santini, The Lords of Discipline, The Prince of Tides, Beach Music. He started just from writing stories about his life. There were two people in his life. One was in grade school. This teacher felt a spark in what Pat was writing in compositions, and he encouraged Pat to continue writing. Also, Pat, in later life, went to the Citadel, graduated first in his class, and one of his teachers there, in fact, he wrote the first book called The Boo, B-O-O. That was his teacher. That was his nickname.
Okay, Ed, let me do this. Let me let Sean speak to you because I think I know where you're going, and this is about the influence of teachers and on these writers. So let me let him respond because we got a bunch of calls that are hanging out there. But I appreciate your phone call. Thanks so much for calling, Sean. You want to respond to that? If your teachers had not encouraged you, would that have been a bad thing?
Yeah, I think for me, like, and also just to jump on what Ed said, Pat Conroy was one of our great American writers. I love Prince of Tides.
Mm-hmm.
But, for me, teachers, other than my mother, they're the most powerful influence in my life because they believed in me, and they don't have to. Your mama is always going to think you're a good writer, a good artist, a good actor, a good, you can get on a guitar and only know 2 chords, and your mama's like, he's the next Jimi Hendrix. But, but a teacher believes in you because they see that in you. And for me, right. They just mean the world to me.
Absolutely. Let's talk to Mike in Norfolk. Hi, Mike. You're on the air.
Hey, Barbara.
Hi.
Really enjoying your show today. And Sean, it's an honor to talk to you and listen to you. And I've read 3 of your books, so they're terrific. I tell everybody about them.
Thank you.
I just wondering about your writing process, if you could talk a little bit more about it. For instance, you mentioned Walter Mosley. He had a book. He says there's 2 different types of writers, one who does all this outlining and one who just starts and flows. Do you have a concept of where the book is going, or just kind of...
Oh, that's organically. Mike, thank you so much for the call. Before you answer, Sean, let me just tell folks, this is Mike Nepler. He is a former reporter at the Virginian Pilot, and he was the one who first told me about S.A. Cosby.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that. I owe you a crab cake down at the oceanfront. But for me, I'm sort of a hybrid. I don't like to do extensive outlining, but I do like to write pretty extensive synopses. I don't know the plural of synopsis, but I do write a pretty extensive synopsis about the story, and basically it's sort of a stream of consciousness type thing where I'm just telling myself the story. Like for Black Dot Wasteland, it's like, oh, there's a guy who's a mechanic and he used to be a getaway driver and he has a family and he's trying to get out of poverty, and what does that look like? And then so that's me telling myself the story. And then from that, I extrapolate the larger story at hand, the book. A lot of times the synopsis in the book go in vastly different ways, but it's sort of like the synopsis is a roadmap for me. I will tell you, I'm the laziest writer in the world. I try to get everything I can in the first draft so that I don't have as much work to do on the second one. I have friends. I have a friend named Jordan Harper, who's an incredible writer, wrote Everybody Knows, a really great crime novel set in California, who writes dozens, like he writes 5 and 6 drafts. I ain't got time for all that.
But do you sit down? I mean, like when you wake up in the morning, do you go, okay, it's 9 o'clock, so I'm going to spend from 9 until noon writing? Or does it just hit you in the middle of the day and you have to go off and start writing?
I grew up really, really poor, and so I am too poor to wait for inspiration. And so I get up at 9:30. Around 10 o'clock, I start writing. I write to about 2, especially when I'm in the process of really in the meat of a book. A lot of times at the beginning of a book, it is more nebulous. It's more, let me see how I feel. Let me write. Let me sketch some ideas. I go on, I don't know, I don't want to give a unearned advertisement, but I go on Pinterest a lot. I'm a very visual writer, so I'll pull up like pictures of drag races, or I'll pull up pictures of small towns or creepy woods or Southern Gothic aesthetics, and I write little vignettes about the pictures. And then sometimes they make it into the book, sometimes it doesn't. I do that a lot when I'm stuck. If I ever get stuck, I'll just look at a bunch of pictures and sort of get inspiration from that. But, my process is usually 1 to 2 drafts and then a final draft. I try not to do more than that because, like I said, I'm really lazy. That's why I make up all my small towns. I set the stories in small towns that I make up, and then I use real locations as sort of bellwethers and points of interest around the town. But the actual little towns, I make them up, because I don't want to do all the geography. So,
you don't want to do the research.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. I got an email this morning from Kat Sharp. And she says, I'm looking forward to your interview with S.A. Cosby today. Everyone here in Mathews is so proud of him. I enjoy seeing his books face out in every indie bookstore we visited this year. We are especially grateful to Sean for the generosity he showed to a fellow writer in Mathews County. Sean met with us, read a pre-publication manuscript of Swing Bridge, and provided a beautiful blurb for the back cover of our book. Secretly, I'd like to see an in conversation sometime with S.A. Cosby and Bronwyn Hughes, two Mathews voices from very different perspectives. How much are writers supportive of each other? Is it competition or is it really I got your back?
You know what's funny? So I write mainly crime and suspense, and in my subgenre, it is so much support. Like, we all look out for each other. I think. Again, I'm going to name drop again, so bear with me.
That's okay.
But I got to meet Dennis Lehane last year, and he is just he's one of my heroes. He's him and Walter. He's on my Mount Rushmore. It's Walter, it's Elmer Leonard, it's Dennis Lehane, it's Sarah Paresky and Sue Grafton. Are the people that I admire so much, and I've gotten to meet a few of them. And Dennis said, I think crime writers look out for each other because we're sort of the redheaded stepchild of literature. We don't get as much respect as maybe we deserve, but as he said, everybody likes our sales. But but I think in crime fiction, because it's such a big cake, and it's so many different slices. So I can write rural Southern noir, and I can see my friend Kelly Garrett, who writes, urban domestic suspense. And I can see my friend Jennifer Hilliard, who writes domestic thrillers, and I can talk to my friend Jordan Harper, who writes, California corruption, crime thrillers. There's so many subgenres within the genre that we never feel like we're competing with each other. And I always love to see another crime writer do well because it just opens up doors for me. I think, for me, crime fiction, there's people who look down the nose at crime fiction, but for me, every great novel could be considered crime fiction. There's a book called Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky that is, one of the greatest books in English ever written, and it's about crime. I mentioned it earlier, but one of my favorite novels is 1,000 Acres by James Smiley. There is crime at the center of that. I think, again, like I said, crime fiction is the greatest vehicle to talk about the human condition. Because, like I said, not everybody is going to understand every demographic, every situation, but everybody understands desperation. Everybody understands pain and loss, and I think crime fiction is able to articulate that better than any other.
So there are universal themes that everybody can relate to, regardless of where they come from or what their situation is. Yeah. Exactly. Let's go to, I hope I say this right, Roby in Mathews?
Yes.
Hi. You're on the air.
Hey, Roby.
Can we hear? Roby, you're breaking up. Can you speak again? Uh-oh. Yeah, I think we lost her. Okay. She must be. So you guys live like really way out in the country, right?
Yeah. Like I said, we're right about a Chesapeake Bay. So that last caller, Roby, I know her. She's a friend of mine. So glad she tried to call in. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, she said her comment was how proud she is of you. So there you go. Let's talk to Don in Hampton. Hi, Don. You're on the air.
Hi, and I won't take long.
Okay.
John, my last name is Cosby. My family is from Gloucester. I have never met a Cosby male outside of my dad. We had 4 sisters. And my brother and I are stuck in the family tree sideways because my dad was born in 1910. I was born late 1956. So I'm his last child. Yet I had an older sibling brother, because my dad was a widower, that was born in 1928. So
wow.
I heard the initial interview of you with Terry Gross, Fresh Air, several months ago. So I didn't really, my brother said he knew who you were. But it's just wonderful. I was at Hampton University.
Thank you so much.
Right, and then I left, and I was in the San Francisco Bay Area for 30 years. I saw the host at a little theater, Hampton University, 2013, when I came back. I saw Barbara Ham Lee. It was the first time.
Oh.
Yeah, that's right, Barbara. The first time. Yeah, and you did a fabulous job.
Well, thank you.
Yes, on a I think it was a Wednesday night. But I would love. Yeah, it was just so cool. But I would love to. The next time you do a book signing, I've got to figure it out, because I need to shake your hand. As I said, I've never ever met a Cosby male outside my family.
It's so good to meet you, man.
Oh.
I'm sure we related down the road.
Yep, somewhere in that tree, even though I know you said you were sideways, somewhere in that tree you guys are hanging. Thanks so much for the call, Don. I tell you, Sean, you got a lot of love going on in the Hampton Roads area for you.
I appreciate it so much. Like, I think, coming from a small town, coming from the background that we came from, me and my brother and my mom, and seeing the way people really support the writing and support me as an artist, it overwhelms me. I love my hometown. I love where I come from. I rep Virginia and I rep Mathews because it's what made me. It's what shaped me. And all my family that live there support me. All my friends that live there support me. The people in the town support me. It's such a great feeling because, everything that I do, everything that I write about, even though I write about certain subjects that are dark and not easy to talk about, it all comes from a place of love because I love my hometown. I love where I come from.
So we got a Facebook question. Lorraine from Portsmouth. She wants to know, who are your new favorite authors or new favorite books?
Wow. Okay. So there are a couple that I will put out, I will say. One is a gentleman named Eli Craner. He's from Arkansas. He wrote a book called Don't Know Tough a couple of years ago, and last year he wrote a book called Ozark Dog. Really great Southern writer, Southern noir writer. And a really good guy. I've gotten to meet him in person. Another one is a good friend of mine named, I mentioned him earlier, so I'll mention both of them back to back. Kelly Garrett and Jennifer Hillier are both writers that I admire. They both write urban domestic thrillers and domestic thrillers respectively. Both are incredible writers, incredible artists that I really like. The last book I read from someone I don't know that I really liked, was I read a book called Her Name is Night by Yasmin Agone. I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's Yasmin, Agnoe. And the best way to describe it is an African female John Wick, and I love that book. It was remarkable. I thought that was incredible. The book I'm reading right now, so I'm in the middle of it, so I don't know exactly how it's going to end, is I am reading, and this is where y'all can be jealous, I got an advanced copy of Jessamine Ward's next book, Let Us Descend, and gosh, it's just, you think sometimes that you're pretty good as a writer, you think you got a handle on this thing, and then you read something like Jessamine Ward, and I guarantee you she's thrown away more good sentences than I'll ever write. She's just remarkable. Yeah.
So, Sean, which of the 4 that you've written so far that are bestsellers, have all been bestsellers, which one's your favorite?
I think I get this question a lot, and I used to say, well, the one I most recently finished is my favorite or whatever. But, I got to be honest, I think Blacktop Wasteland is my favorite because it's just, when I wrote that book, I had parted ways with an agent who had tried to sell Darkest Prayer, and no shade to the agent. Sometimes things just don't work out. And I was sort of alone. I kind of was drifting. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I watched this PBS program, ironically, of American Masters with Bruce Springsteen. And he was talking about when he wrote Born to Run. And he basically said, I'm paraphrasing here, he had nothing to lose. He knew he was going to get dropped from his record label. He had already had 2 albums that hadn't done that great. So when he went to record Born to Run, it was like he just said, and again, I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to put everything I love about rock and roll into this album. Not what the producers say, not what my managers say, what I love about rock and roll. And I remember watching that, and I was thinking, the next book I write, I'm going to put everything I love about crime fiction in it. I'm going to put the South and fast cars and soul food and moonshine and darkness and light and tragic and toxic masculinity and the love of family and just, and just being behind the wheel of a really fast car that's got enough torque to throw you back in the seat. And that book changed my life. And I think that it will always be my favorite just because it's the most pure distillation of what I'm trying to do when I write.
Wow. So what are you writing now? Because I need something else to read.
Yeah, I'm working on a book right now, tentatively titled King of Ashes, about a family who owns a crematory who falls in with, unfortunately, with some gangsters. And that book is going really well so far, knock on wood. It's about family dynamics, about, how we sometimes fall into roles in our families that maybe we didn't ask for, and how those affect the rest of our lives. But it's also got a lot of crime fiction. There's a lot of opportunities for fun and interesting scenes when you have a crematory. So I'm working on that now. I'm also working on part 2 of the kids book that I did with Questlove. We're working on a title for that now, so I'm still working on it. I'm actually writing them both at the same time, so
wow.
Don't do that. But,
now, I was going to say, now I know you're married, so how does Mrs. Cosby feel about all this?
Oh, she loves it. She's ecstatic. She loves having an author in the house, and I wouldn't be doing all this if it wasn't for her. So
So are there times where you're like in immersed in the writing and so forth, and she needs you to do something else or whatever, or does she just leave you alone and say, "Oh, he's off in this thing right now"?
Oh no! I still got to carry the trash out and clean the litter box out. So it's like nationally famous writer and 2-time New York Times bestseller, but I still got to clean up after the cat. The cat runs the house.
What's the cat's name?
Flipper.
Flipper.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
He sounds like a dolphin. That's a whole story I can't get into.
Okay, all right. So we got about a minute left. What do you want? Final words that you want to say to our audience in terms of your books or in terms of writing? What do you want to tell people in terms of books and why they're important in your life? In lives, period.
Books are incredibly important in our lives. I just want to say really quick, I love Virginia, and the fact that Virginia, in 1619, the first slaves came to the United States, and they came to Virginia. And the fact that you and I, are African Americans on the radio talking about books and letters and life and what we can achieve, that means the most to me. That's why I always rep Virginia. That's why I really love it. I go places, it's always 2 up, 2 down, because nothing is more important to me than the idea that what we can achieve once we put our minds to it.
Absolutely. And it's so very well said. So his 4 books, the latest one is All the Sinners Bleed. And he also has written Razor Blade Tears, My Darkest Prayer, which was the first book. And which one? Oh, Blacktop Wasteland. How could I forget your favorite book? Absolutely. Thank you, Sean, so much for joining us. You are probably the first author that I've had multiple people call me and say, you've got to get him on the show. So here you go, audience. You're very familiar now with S.A. Cosby. Thanks so much for joining us, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
All righty. You take care now. And we hope that you've enjoyed this edition of Another View. If you'd like to hear this show again or share it with a friend, and I would encourage you to listen again because he named a lot of different books that you could go in and read if you're interested. Go to our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. And while you're there, please remember to sign up for our eView newsletter. We only send it once a week, and it will tell you about the show that's coming up for that week. Next week on Another View, your favorite cardiologist, Dr. Keith Newby, is here with another view on health, and he's talking about COVID. Yes, it's back, folks. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Hey, stay safe this weekend. Sounds like we're going to have a bad storm. Let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever. whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.